Hi, this is Dave Andrus with Prime Pool Route Sales. I bought my first pool service in 2002. I started with 100 chemical-only customers, but after a few years, we had over 400 customers in all different service types: chemical-only, a mid-level service, and full service. I know what it's like to have employees and trucks, but I also know what it's like to be a single poler too. Unlike other pool route brokers, I actually worked the business, so I know the business. When I'm working with a seller, I can relate to the products they offer, the interactions they have with their customers, and basically just the ups and downs of being self-employed. When I started doing pools, I knew absolutely nothing about pool service. Some guys are actually raised in the business, but that wasn't my story. I learned the business by educating myself day in and day out by doing pools. But what really helped was being part of a small group of pool service operators that supported each other. I and two other guys, we founded the local IPSA chapter where I was on the board for about 15 years. I loved the camaraderie and the fellowship, not only with IPSA, but with the industry as a whole. After the first 4 years of owning a pool service and growing the business like mad all over the place, I started selling off my accounts in cities that were further than I wanted to drive. And my goal was to consolidate all my accounts in my own hometown. So I started selling off my accounts in 2006, and I sold them for 12 times gross. If you're not familiar with the term 12 times gross, it means that you're selling the accounts for 1 year's worth of service income. So if you're earning $10,000 a month in gross monthly service income, then the value of your route is 12 times that, or $120,000. So after I sold those accounts, I'd bring on new customers into my hometown as quickly as possible, so I really didn't experience a loss of monthly income. I ended up selling so many routes, usually to people that weren't even in the industry, and I'd provide training to the very best of my ability. And the reason for this is because after a while, you become pretty attached to your customers, and you wouldn't want to leave them with somebody who had poor training. So when I'd sell an account, I'd put the money into savings, and then I'd buy a rental property. I'd sell more accounts and buy another rental property. I'd sell more accounts and buy another rental property. So over time, I had these rental properties that were providing 100% positive cash flow. But the beauty of selling the accounts and building routes was not just because it was incredibly profitable, but it gave me the opportunity to build ridiculously tight routes. It got to the point where we were servicing about every 10th home in some neighborhoods, and even picking up several next door neighbors next to our existing customers. But after nearly 20 years, I decided to sell the business. We bought an RV, bought the Jeep to go behind it, and I traveled around the country. We rented a home in Florida for a couple of months, and I enjoyed the good life, retiring at the age of 55. But then I started to get bored. So we came back to California, sold the RV, sold the Jeep, and we opened up Prime Pool Route Sales. In addition to having my California real estate broker's license, I also received my Florida real estate broker's license. And then we started listing and selling pool routes all over. What makes Prime Pool Route Sales so successful is that I'm not just a business broker. I've got over 21 years of practical pool service operations experience. And most of those years, I've been in the business of selling pool routes. After selling so many routes for so many pool service operators, you tend to hear the same questions over and over. For example, how much does it cost to sell my accounts? Or simply, what are the steps to selling my business? So let's review the top 5 questions most pool route sellers have. Question number 1, do you charge an upfront fee? No. There are no upfront fees or hidden charges. We appraise your business, we list the business on the top business for sale websites, we pre-qualify the buyer, handle all the paperwork, and conduct the escrow. We do not get paid until your business sells. Question number 2, how much does it cost to sell my accounts? If you're like me, you don't want to waste time, you want to know the bottom line. Prime Pool Route Sales markets your accounts for 12 times your gross monthly service income, less a commission equal to 2 times gross, netting you 10 times your gross. Question number 3, what training do I have to provide? The seller provides 3 months of support to the buyer. This 90-day training period, known as the guarantee period, starts with the seller providing 2 weeks of on-the-job training. The seller trains the buyer on general pool maintenance, learning chemical management, how to clean a filter, simple repairs, seller tips, and other related training. After the initial 2-week training period, the buyer begins to service the pools on his own with the seller, providing support during the remainder of the 90 days. Question number 4. What exactly is involved during the route sales process? Prime Pool Route Sales lists all of their businesses for sale at no cost to the seller. We only get paid when we sell your accounts. We appraise the value of your pool service. We list the accounts on top business for sale websites. We also pre-qualify the buyer's ability to purchase. Once the buyer has been pre-qualified, we arrange communications between buyer and seller. During those communications, the buyer has the opportunity to ask relevant business questions about the seller's business. Should the buyer decide to proceed, the seller meets with the buyer and shows him his financials, typically profit and loss reports. The buyer has the opportunity to tour part of the route and ask the seller additional questions face to face. If the buyer decides to purchase the accounts, he deposits the full purchase amount into escrow. Within 3 days, a check is cut to the seller totaling 90% of the sales proceeds. 10% is held back in escrow until the end of what is referred to as the 90-day guarantee period. The seller then begins 2 weeks of on-the-job training with the buyer, followed by additional support provided to the buyer for a total of 90 days. This includes assisting the buyer in all facets of owning the pool service. At the end of the 90-day guarantee period, the buyer and seller determine if any accounts are lost and whether the account was or was not lost due to the error of the buyer. A final check is then cut to the seller for the monies held in escrow. Question number 5. What happens if a buyer cancels during the 90-day guarantee period? At the end of 90 days, the buyer and seller review all remaining accounts. If the buyer fails to do his job, let's say he lets the pool go green, then the seller is entitled to those funds. On the other hand, if the customer cancels at no fault due to the buyer's performance, such as the customer sells his house, then that account is debited from those proceeds. The seller then receives a final check from escrow. If you're interested in learning more about buying or selling a pool route and how to make it successful and profitable, then feel free to call me or text me. You can also go onto our website at primepoolroutesales.com to schedule a Zoom call with me. Thank you very much for watching. Blessings in Jesus' name.